Hello, y'all. Christian White, the One Day at a Time Dad, back with another Listening to Learn. Today, I have a pleasure of interviewing Miss Elizabeth.
Yes.
A pleasure. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I spoke to her a little bit already. It's our first time meeting, though we follow each other on Facebook. So I'll just start with it. Tell me about the work you do primarily and why it's so important to you.
For me, I work for the Multicultural AIDS Coalition, and I work for Casairis. It's a Latino program for Latinos living with HIV and AIDS and who struggle with addiction, mental health. They have barriers to health care or who have dropped out of health care, not on medication. And for me, I love doing this job because when I found out my status, it was really hard and difficult for me. And
so I know what you mean. My status, I mean, some people might think Facebook. Can you just explain that a little?
So when I found out that I was HIV positive, that changed my life completely, you know.
How did you find out?
So I went to South Bay, and I was in South Bay, and I had some friends there as well. Who
the county jail?
Yes.
Okay.
And that was like doing a first county bid because I always went to MCI Framingham.
Oh, you served state time as well?
Yes. And so when I went to South Bay, I had friends there who also wanted to get tested, so I went to support, and the only one that came back positive was me. So they, in reality, they were supporting me.
How did you take the news initially?
First, it was a shock because, you know, even though you're practicing unsafe behaviors like you're using needles with someone else, you're having unprotected sex, I always thought this is not going to happen to me.
I get that.
You know, and even though I knew I was out there, I just knew that I didn't have it. But when I went and got tested, I had it, so I had to deal with that. And it was really hard because I thought I was gonna like die tomorrow, you know, because I didn't have the information. I didn't know nothing about it. I just know because my uncle had it back in the day, and people were just dying.
Yeah.
And that's all I knew. So when I found out that I had HIV, I had to, you know, start learning what HIV meant. You know, it didn't mean that I was going to die tomorrow. It just meant that I had to change my lifestyle. And it saved my life in reality, because I believed that I was where I needed to be at that moment.
So let me ask you, what was it like for you growing up? What is your first thought as a little girl doing whatever it is that you're doing?
Every time I think about my childhood, what I think about is I was probably like 6 or 7 years old, and all I remember was my house being raided by the police looking for my uncles. Because I had 2 uncles who were drug dealers and, you know, into the lifestyle, and how scared I was of that. You know, I have a brother and sister, and I just took them, and we were just sitting there, and we were just so scared. And that's all every time I think about my childhood, that's what I think about. And I don't know why, because at that moment I said, I don't want to be like them. But I became them.
Do you remember how the drug use began?
For me, so I ran away when I was 13 years old from my home, and I never went back. But even before I was introduced to the drugs, I was introduced to the lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And that alone, just the lifestyle alone, gave me that adrenaline, gave me that, I don't know, something.
Would you say that the lifestyle's an addiction in and of itself beyond anything else?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, correct. So I was introduced to the lifestyle, and that made me like my adrenaline, everything. And, you know, eventually I started using, and I started like with marijuana, drinking, pills, then cocaine, and eventually heroin. You know, and I did that for many years, and then I started shooting, and that's what really brought me to my knees, because I started shooting coke and heroin.
Understood. What was it like while you were in jail, like dealing with mental health?
So I really didn't know much about mental health because, so let me go back a little. I did my first state bid when I was 17 years old.
Do you mind if I ask how old you are now?
53.
Okay.
Yes.
Gotta ask permission.
Yes. So that's the first time I ever went to Framingham.
Mm-hmm.
But I still had the mentality as a kid. I was 17, you know, and at that time.
Do you remember what you were arrested for?
Yes, for trafficking.
Okay.
You know, I got arrested for bringing drugs from New York to Boston on the bus.
Okay.
So I got arrested. They took me to the Women's House of D. I don't know if people remember that. That's way back in the day, that it was like a dungeon. It was, you had to go down these stairs, and I stayed there for a whole weekend. And then that Monday I went to court, and they took me to MCI. But back in the day, MCI is nothing the way it is now. You know, it had a swimming pool. Your family would come in to the yard, and they had family days, and they had all these things there. But the only good thing I can say is while I was there, you know, I got my GED. I learned how to type. Back then we typed on typewriters, not computers.
Yeah.
And, you know, I learned a lot from there, but I still didn't learn, because for me that was like a kiddie camp. And I don't know if you understand that, but it really didn't give me the mentality at that time, because they hit me with an 8 to 10. I did my time. I had to do 3 years mandatory, and then I had to do 5 years on parole. So when I got out, I went right back to everything I knew. And what I knew was how to...
Did you know throughout all that time that you were gonna go back?
No, because in my mind, I was like, you know, when I get out, you know, I got my GED, I'm gonna try to move forward. But the thing for me was that I went back to the same people, places, and things. So eventually I went back to everything, and then I have gotten pregnant, and my son passed away at 3 months old. And at that time I was introduced to heroin and fell in love. That was my way to cope with my son's death.
I can't even, honestly, I was just thinking about that. Like it's almost like the perfect cocktail.
Yes.
I can't even imagine that, obviously. I mean, but I just imagine the sequence of events. That had to be hard.
Once he passed away, it's like it was a spiral. You know, I in between I had 3 kids. You know, a lot happened within that time. I had my children. But when he passed away, he was my only child that I had at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, my life just went upside down, and I started using heroin, and like I said, I that became my everything. That became my man, everything to me.
What kind of mom are you?
Now?
Yeah.
Now I'm a good mom. I'm there for my kids, but most importantly, I'm there for my grandchildren. See, so I have 3 kids and 4 grandkids, and I believe that God gave me a second chance to do it right.
May I ask, when you say 3 children, does this include your son?
No.
Okay, so four. Okay, I just wanted to understand correctly.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I have 2 daughters and a son, and my son who passed away. And I have 4 grandkids. So I just feel like God gave me another opportunity to do it right.
So let me ask, when you say do it right, what are some values that you feel like you should be passing down to your children and grandchildren?
To me, it's just to be a good human being, to help one another, be there for one another, in all, just be a good person. We all make mistakes because nobody's perfect, but my grandkids have never seen me with a beer in my hand. My grandkids has never seen me with a smoking weed, none of that. They might see me with a cigarette because I am a smoker, but they can never say, oh, I seen my Nana drink, or I seen my Nana high, or I seen my Nana this way. No, because I don't want them to see that. If they learn it, and I talk about, they're small. My grandson is 9, but he knows a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we forget, because I remember when I was actively using, that my son, who's alive, he was like 3 years old, and I was really sick, but I couldn't get out of bed. And my son brought me, I used to have this pouch that in there I had like my drugs and stuff. My son didn't know what was in there, but he knew whatever that was in that pouch made me well.
That was mommy's medicine.
It was mommy's medicine, exactly. So he would bring that to me and say, here, mommy, for you can feel better. And that really broke my heart. Like, it's like, oh my God, but I couldn't stop using. Not even when I went to jail and my parental rights were terminated, and they kept giving me chance after chance. I couldn't stop.
I mean, it's interesting, but it almost sounds like a reason to use more.
Exactly.
It's just so interesting the way that works.
The thing is, for me, like, it becomes a coping mechanism. Like, for me, what I do is, if I use, I'm not gonna how do you say that? I'm not gonna, feel, or I'm not gonna think about this or that, but it's just making the situation worse, so I have to go back, because you had asked me a question about mental health. And for me, I didn't know what mental health meant. I didn't know that I suffered from PTSD. I didn't know that I suffered from bipolar or depression. I didn't know none of that. I didn't know what that meant. I just knew that I was up and down. One day I was happy, one day I was over happy, one day I was really angry, and I didn't understand why until I started. And unfortunately, I learned all this in prison. Because do you want to talk to somebody? Do you want to see somebody? And then that's where I learned a lot of the stuff that I didn't know. And I started seeing a counselor, I started seeing a therapist, and then here comes all these diagnoses. They were throwing all these things at me. I'm like, well, what are you talking about? And then giving me all this medication. And I was like, why do I have to take these meds? And I didn't understand that it was okay, because I suffer from depression. I suffer from bipolar. I have PTSD, from when I was a kid, and being in relationships of domestic violence. And, even my children suffer from it because they saw it. And I never thought that would come down to them.
Yes.
And for me, everything becomes like a coping mechanism. Like, okay, I'm feeling down, I'm feeling unhappy, or whatever the situation may be. I'm just going to go and cop and get high, and everything's going to go away. But I'm just sweeping stuff under the rug, because when I stopped using, I didn't know how to feel my emotions. And I didn't know when I would start crying and couldn't stop crying, why was I doing that? Or when I was really angry and lashing out at people, I didn't know that it was because there was other things going on inside me. So that's when I had to start, okay, I really got to get this together, but I didn't know how.
So what did the process of learning how to deal with your own mind happen?
So for me, when I went to jail, when I went to South Bay this time, they gave me 18 months, and I said, okay, this time I really have to do something different. Because if I go back to the same thing...
So there was a choice there. Like,
yes,
for yourself.
For myself.
And
for myself. So what I did was, when they gave me my HIV status, I started educating myself. I started reading up on it. I was asking questions, you know, and the unfortunate thing is that when you are diagnosed in jail, everybody already knows, because, you know, there's certain people that come to see certain people. So when you used to see the people who would come to see the HIV people, so people already knew that, okay, this person's HIV because so-and-so is coming to see her.
And what's interesting is in prison, they act like they're being, this is the way they protect your identity when there's only one person that handling it all. It's interesting how it just
so they think they're really being
secretive about it and clandestine and quiet, and it's like, no, you're not being discreet at all.
And you know, when you're in jail and you're HIV positive, like, you get thermals,
and you get so I know when I was upstate, we used to, and it was a false assumption, but we used to assume that anybody that used to get a ton of pills in the Ensure drink had it. That was just the assumption, because we always wanted to buy the Ensure drink because it was a good meal replacement after working out. But those were assumptions.
Yes.
I want to ask, what was it like, and I'm just assuming that you have because of the work you do, what was it like when you first spoke to your children about your positive status?
So for me, like I said, I educated myself first, because I really wanted to know, all right, am I gonna live or am I gonna die? Am I really gonna die tomorrow or the next day or whatever? So I started educating myself, and I started talking to people who had it for years.
And there was a readily available community of support and like you found people to connect with soon?
Not really. So let me go a little bit. I say South Bay that I was diagnosed, but it really wasn't in South Bay. It was Nashville Street, because I was being held for going to court until I got diagnosed. Until I got sentenced. So when I went to South Bay, there was other women there already who've had it for years, and like I said, you know, when certain people came to see certain people, we already knew, okay, so when I got there, they came into the unit, and they were bringing me thermals and bringing me certain things, so people already knew. So one of the women came up to me, and, you know, she goes, oh, so you're positive? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she goes, you have HIV. And I said, how do you know that? Like, I don't know this woman, never seen her. She goes, oh, because Sandy just came and seen you. Let's say Sandy is her name.
Yep.
And I was like, yeah. She goes, yeah, because she takes care of all of us. So I said, oh, so you have it? She goes, oh, yeah, I've had it for, I think she said at that time, 14 years or 15, something like that. But anyway, you know, so I started talking to her, and she kind of became like a mentor to me, because she was like older, and she told me how she dealt with it and what she did. So when it was time for me to come out, I was preparing myself, because I had to tell my family, I had to tell my mom.
So during the time that you were in, it was only you and anyone within the jail knew, nobody outside?
Well, my mom did know.
Okay.
But it was like the elephant in the room.
Oh, okay.
You know, I told you.
She was aware of it, but didn't want to acknowledge it.
Exactly. Exactly. And, you know, so when I got released, I said, okay, this time I really have to do something different. And I heard about this program called UMIS that was in Roxbury. It's part of the Dimick Center. and it's for women living with HIV and who have mental health issues. So I fit the criteria, and they paroled me to the program.
Mm-hmm.
So when I went there, you know, I started learning more about myself, what I liked. You know, I didn't even know my favorite color. I didn't know what I like to do.
And how old are you at that moment?
At that moment, I was 34 years old.
Okay.
And I didn't even know how to make a bed.
Yes. And at 34, you began to wake up on some levels and learn yourself.
I did.
And you know what? It's. I wish people would not understand more the backstory that people have, and like if you're not taught certain things, you're not gonna know how to do certain things.
Exactly.
And vice versa. You know, some things you have to be untaught to do. But it just amazes me how not everyone, but certain people in mainstream society tend to think we grow in a very linear, specific way.
Exactly.
And that is not reality.
No, it's not. And you know, the sad part about it, that for me, you know, I learned how to make a bed when I went to MCI. You know, when I went to Framingham, because there was a certain way that you had to do your bed, especially if you had roommates. You know, they would teach you, okay, this is the way you make a bed, this is what you do. And, you know, you had to follow that protocol.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
you couldn't be in a room with two other women and their beds, it was nice and neat, and yours was a mess. That would be a big issue.
Yes.
You know, and there was rules inside the jail that had to be followed.
Yes. The unwritten rules.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
You know, and that was, even they were unwritten rules, but in reality they were life rules.
Yeah.
Because it taught me how to do certain things. It taught me how to become a woman. You know, when the first bid that I did, the 3 years, you know, for me it was a kiddie camp. Because, you know, they had a pool, they had all this stuff, and I'm just here for 3 years, that's fine, I can do this, you know, and I went back out, and it became a cycle.
Yeah.
But every time I came back, there was something different. Every time I came back, they had a new building. They had no more swimming pool. They had no more ATU. Now they have this modular. I'm like, what? You know, it became scarier and scarier.
Yes. And I mean, that happened in Massachusetts. I mean, it only gets worse.
Yes.
Prison only gets worse.
And it was so overcrowded and so many women. And it was like, what is going on? Like, something has to change.
So let me ask, what was it like that time around trying to get services? Were they just as available as they were when it was more like the kiddie camp?
I think there were services, but I think that because of all the overcrowded conditions that they had, a lot of people were just falling through the cracks.
Yeah.
Due to them not having the proper staff, or, you know, even culturally.
Absolutely.
Like, I knew women that were in there that didn't know how to speak English. Yeah. And they didn't have Spanish speaking nothing, you know.
Yeah.
They may have one person, and that person had probably a caseload of over 100 or 200
Absolutely.
people.
And I try to explain that a lot to people, where because of overcrowdedness, and now it's not as overcrowded as it once was, but the culture that the overcrowdedness set is still there, which is, like you said, you can get a clinician, most times it's an intern, with you know, over 100 cases, and it turns into, they'll literally call you into the office and they'll say, are you going to hurt yourself? Someone else? No, okay, then you're okay. That's all it comes down to.
Exactly.
So but I want you to answer the question of, what was it like when you first spoke to your children?
Okay, so when I went to this program, I heard about the Boston Living Center, which is a place where people go to get meals, but they also have different type of services. And back then, they had these groups where the mothers and the children can go. So I went to a mother's group, and my kids went to a kids group. So it prepared me and prepared them for me to tell them my status.
So what did that group look like? I mean, when you say the group, was the group speaking about HIV at all?
So
that's what were they like hinting that this is what's the end result going to be? Is your mom telling you this? Like,
so
how did it stay secret to the point where you were like, you got to express it yourself?
So for us, you know, we were able to have like a platform where we can come and speak and speak our daily struggle about being HIV positive and having children and trying to work and trying to get back into society and be accepted by society. You know, when I came out, I was on Social Security, wasn't making ends meet, and I couldn't get a job because of my Corey.
Yeah.
And the only way that I was able to get a job was I started volunteering for this agency. But we'll talk about that. Let me get back to my children. So in the group, it was a mother's group that were HIV positive. And like I said, it was just a platform for us to go and vocalize and our feelings and our daily struggles, and then for the children,
like kind of like a HIV Anonymous,
like a HIV support group.
Okay.
And then the kids would go into their group, or we're in group, and they're teaching them, all right, about HIV, what this HIV means, what is, you know, like stuff like that, for them to have a little bit of knowledge about what HIV is.
Okay, nope, it's like a health class. It's
exactly.
Like, got it.
Like for kids.
That makes sense.
You know, so my kids were about my grandchildren. They were 10, 11, and 12. And I sat them down and you know, right after the group, with one of the facilitators from the group who helped me tell my children, and the only thing my kids said was like, are you gonna die? And if they had it. So I told them, you know, you're not gonna die, I'm not gonna die, and you don't have it. And it doesn't mean that because I touch you or I kiss you, you're gonna get it. No, that's not how it is. You know, and they already knew that because that's what they were teaching them in their group. You know,
does that group still exist?
It does not.
Does a preparation group like that exist now?
No.
That's so interesting, because that actually seems like
nope,
one of the better ways to do it. Like,
exactly.
Educate them first. And I mean, you can't get around the emotions of, if you know, are you gonna die, things like that. But I mean, interesting. That's okay. That's
it doesn't exist because, you know, back in the day, people who were living with HIV or AIDS had so many services and so many things that we don't have today, because now we can live with this disease. You know, it's not a death sentence anymore.
Got it.
You know, back in the day, they were experimenting with us, given AZT that wasn't even an HIV drug.
Yes.
And instead of people dying of HIV, they were dying of the side effects of the AZT.
Yes.
So, you know, HIV has come a long way. You know, I take one pill once a day instead of when I first was diagnosed and they put me on medication. I was taking like 4 pills in the morning, 4 pills at night, and then on top of that, everything else for the side effects, for the diarrhea, for the fatigue, for this, for that. You know,
where do you feel like, with the current state of the field, however you look at it right now, what is something that awareness continues, there's a need to continue to speak on, and what are some things that would make your job a lot easier?
So for me, with this COVID thing going on, that everything is just going towards the COVID pandemic, they're forgetting that HIV is still on the rise. It's more on the rise now, especially in young people. And I think that we need to continue spreading the word about safe sex and clean needles, and because I cannot tell a person, okay, you have to stop using. You know, that comes within. Like, it took me a process. When I got out of jail and I said I was done,
Mm-hmm.
I was done, you know, and it's because I wanted it. You know, not taking my children, not losing everything I had, not losing my son, nothing made me want to stop using. Until I said I was ready and I was going to do this. But we need to continue with the awareness because HIV is on the rise. STDs, there's a lot of syphilis cases up on the rise, and we're forgetting about this because, you know, now there's a new pandemic going on, so everything is going towards the pandemic. They're also forgetting about the active users. People are still overdosing. People are still dying, and we're not hearing about this. Everything now on TV has to do with COVID,
Yeah.
you know, this or COVID that, but
Yeah.
what happened with people,
Yeah, 2 weeks ago it's an opioid
Yeah.
epidemic. Now it's it's so much is controlled by news cycles
exactly.
in terms of what's important or not.
Exactly, and I think that to make my job easier, I think that, you know, we have to think outside the box. Like, not every size fits all. You know,
Absolutely.
and that's what a lot of people do these days. You know, just to get rid of a patient or a client, they think that, okay, this is going to work for you. It's going to work for you. No, we have to, you know, start thinking outside that box and not categorize each person because we're not the same. What might work for you might not work for me.
Yes.
You know, you have your own style of doing your thing, and I have my own style. And I think that we just need to continue educating our community, you know, about things that are still going on and people are forgetting.
Are you hopeful that we'll reach a point where more people will be aware of this information than not?
I'm hoping, yes. You know, even now, there's still a lot of stigma around addiction, stigma around HIV, and we're in 2020.
What are some ways that you use to, or the organization, to help kind of break down stigma?
So one of the things that, like, what we do at our program is we just continue talking about it. We continue to let people know that you know, you can't get HIV by kissing, touching, you know. This is what you need to do in order not to get it. And just continue giving them the information, because I might give you the information, but you might not use it. But
Yeah.
at least you have it. You have the tools that you're going to need. Because one day you're going to remember, oh, so-and-so told me something about using a condom, or so-and-so told me about, you know, I can get clean needles at A-Hope or wherever. Eventually, I think that people will assimilate the information and use it. You know,
Yes.
we just have to continue.
I agree. I keep putting the words out, the voices out there, keep
Exactly.
getting the story. That's part of why I try to do this, just continue to remind people there are voices that aren't being heard or being heard. So yeah, I totally understand that. Totally understand that. What was it like for you? When did you fully accept yourself? What did the process look like of you becoming to love yourself?
So for me, it was a lot of work. People say that some are crazy than others, and I always used to say, well, I'm the other. But in reality, it's not that. I think that I really had to do a lot of work on myself and start to learn new things, new ways how to cope better, how to talk to people and get my point across without wanting either to fight or get angry. For me, like, so when I was in the program and I got my place and I moved out, I started living on my own, and I had to learn how to pay bills. I had to learn how to take care of a home. and I was on Social Security, and I was like, I can't continue living like this because $500 a month is not working for me. So I went out and I did interview after interview, and instead of me thinking that was gonna help me, it was hurting me, because I was like, F this, these people don't want me, this is my Corey, because my Corey's so long, and I would beat myself up a lot. So I started seeing a therapist, and this therapist really helped me go through the whole motion of acceptance, and it's okay to get turned down. Maybe that wasn't meant for me at that time. So what I did was, someone had told me, if you want to work in this field, your best bet is to volunteer. So I went to this program. It was called HOPE, Hispanic Office of Planning and Evaluation. It was in Jamaica Plain, and so I started there as a volunteer, and I worked harder than the people who were getting paid.
Not surprised.
Yes, I mean,
worked
my
I'm sure that's a pretty common theme across the board.
Because I wanted people to see, that I did have potential, that I can do this, So I started as a volunteer, and a couple of years later, I became the director to the program. And for me, that helped me a lot with my own self-esteem. Like, damn, I can do this. All I have is a GED for MCI Framingham, and I'm the director, or I'm the program coordinator, or I'm doing this.
Yes.
I don't have MD or PhD or anything behind my name, but I did it. And it's because of all the hard work that I put into it.
And you have a whole life experience that a lot of them sometimes don't.
Exactly. I was working at go places and meeting with people doctors, lawyers, judges, and they would say things, and I'm like, oh my God, did they really just say that? And this is somebody who has these little initials behind the MSW or the whatever it is.
How real is, at times, the disconnect between the decision makers within some of these companies and the actual people who are receiving the services? Do you think there's sometimes a huge disconnect?
Oh my God, yeah, very, very, because they're the decision makers, but they haven't lived it, and even if they haven't lived it, they just see numbers and everything on a piece of paper. They don't take the time to come out and meet their community. Okay, meet your constituents, meet the people who are here that vote for you. Come out into our community and see what's really going on. See that people are killing each other. Doesn't matter if they're black, white, Puerto Rican, people killing each other. The use of substances is real. HIV is still on the rise. It's so much going on in our community, and they just see a piece of paper with numbers, but they don't see our faces. They don't hear our voices. And that's what made me send you a friend request when I seen that my niece was on your show, because it's platform like these is where people's voices need to be heard, because a lot of people in our community don't have a voice.
Yeah.
They don't, and if they do, they don't know how to use their voice.
Yeah. Yes.
And we have to be able to do it for them.
Yes.
And not only for them, for our children, for our grandchildren.
Yes, absolutely. So I'll ask one more question, just because I'm curious about what you think, and you've hinted at it in terms of being a grandma and a mom. How important is it that we break these generational cycles?
Oh, for me, it's very, very important. It's like, I don't want my grandkids to go through what I went through. And as a woman, going through all this it's hard, because like we're mothers, we're daughters, we're sisters, we're the home head of household, and we have to go through so much, and we lose everything, especially like a self-worth, a dignity, being out there and trying to to do what you all means necessary to do whatever it takes to get off of E or to get high, or it's just so difficult, because then when we want to get back on track, we have to deal with all that, oh my God, I did this, or I did that. And, I don't want my grandkids to go through that. I don't want my granddaughters, because I have two, to go through that, and this is a cycle, because, I have a daughter who became incarcerated and who went through her own thing, and now she's out and she's doing good with her kids, but it's a cycle.
Do you think you turning your life around and becoming, you may have set an example for one way of living, but then you set an example for another way of living. When your daughter was going through what she was going through, what were you being a positive an example at that time for her to come home to? Do you feel as though that played a part in her still doing well?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. You weren't nervous at all, by the way.